So we're going to go over how to use the seller's net sheet to present buyer offers to a seller. I chose this particular one because it was a multiple offer situation. It made it easy for my sellers to see just the numbers side of the offer to start with. What we had originally done was a net sheet based on listing the home at $430,000. They chose to list it pretty aggressively. They were in a situation with a military transfer, so they knew they needed, they had a date they would be moving out, and then they listed the home once they were out of the home, so it wasn't in transition mode. So they were really excited to get it sold as quickly as they could. So as you look at the range of offers here, that's kind of what they were expecting to have happen. Was they had anticipated that the price would probably get pushed up because they priced low. What they didn't tell me at the time was that there was actually a couple of additional items they were going to be paying off with closing. So when we filled out the net sheet,
Sorry, that's also me. I'm just switching to my so it's easier to see.
kind of what I figured. So based on the name, I figured it was you. Yep. So when we did this net sheet, we had done a net sheet based on just the payoff value of the home. What he didn't tell me was that he did the math on, they had some work done, that had windows put in and some, the heater updated and the AC updated, and had financed it. And he actually still owed money on those. So the numbers you see down here at the bottom were him figuring out what he owed. I had shown him how he could put those in on the blue. Ideally, I'd like to have that in there before, because then it's just easy to just drag and drop it across, and it would show the change on everybody's. He was also, because he was military, was looking at how much he got from his BAH over the just short of 3 years they were there. Of their 3 years worth of payments, just short of $54,000 was made by the military as part of his housing allowance.
Sheesh.
So it was a benefit to him to buy through VA. He bought in Weber County at the time. Weber County was just taken off. So we had done a list price of $430. We had based it around if we were to close middle of June. And then for the proration, we looked up how much had been paid in taxes the year before, filled everything in, and that's how we came up, it automatically came up with, if they didn't pay any closing costs, where they would be. So then as the offers came in, I just put them in the order that they were received. The reason offer number 7 is over here at the front is because ultimately that was the offer that they accepted. It came in terms of chronological order, it was the 7th offer they received out of 9 offers. In terms of once they ran the numbers, then we wanted to sort them out, stand them up side by side. I'm not quite sure why that was a little different there. I think you know what? I think he went and figured he'd made another payment. So he messed with the numbers. I shared this one so he could change the numbers if he needed, as we went along. Ultimately, what they were looking at, of course, was the bottom line down here. That's why. The one thing, of course, that you can see that would make the biggest difference for most of them was right here on yes or no if they were paying seller closing costs. 5,500 there versus. Now, trick question. Every time we do one of these with a buyer, or excuse me, with a seller, especially someone who has purchased with VA, can a seller reject an offer based on the financing?
Yes.
Yeah, they can.
As long as that's what they're rejecting it on, they're not rejecting it on some other reason like seller, any of the protected classes. In this case, the seller purchased on VA and had said, if the right offer came along in VA and it was a kind of a dead heat between it and that offer and someone else, then they would probably take the VA offer.
Wow.
In this case, they got a really good non-VA offer and a really solid VA offer. But the amount being requested on closing costs in the VA offer bumped it out of first place. See you tomorrow. Yep. So they can do that, and she was very specific about asking that. You may sometimes have sellers say, look, all I want to see first are cash offers. Then all I want to see next is conventional. So you can sort them that way. All I want is, then VA or FHA. If it is a condominium or any type of property like that that has to meet FHA and VA requirements, those may get bumped down to the end, because even though you may post whether or not it's FHA or VA approved, doesn't always guarantee that the buying agent paid attention to that. So you can sort them that way. But this gave them then just the straight up, what could they potentially net? And to fill this out, you basically just go through the rep sheet. You're just putting in the purchase price. You're putting in the closing date from paragraph 24, settlement deadline. And then the algorithm already figures out how many days to prorate the taxes and everything else. And then if they are paying closing costs, we typically change that N to a letter Y, so that it shows, yes, they are paying some kind of closing costs.
On yours, they were gonna pay closing costs, but now they're not.
He went in and made some changes to this. The downside to sharing this with them is sometimes they can mess it up.
Right.
Honestly, as a backup, if you're going to share this with your seller, a good practice is to make sure you've got a copy that you don't share with them. So if they go in and start monkeying around with numbers and mess it up, you've got a clean one.
Right.
And with it being a Google sheet, you can have pretty much as many as you can get away with on your Google Drive.
So when you met with the seller for the first time, you copied this and then did you email it to him? I'll see you on Tuesday, or how did you do it?
With this buyer, because I knew the property and I went ahead and did the research, and had prepared it, and I shared it with him and said, we'll go over it when we get there. Because I knew he could read it.
Oh, you printed it out and brought it to him?
Well, I actually shared the link, went up and just on.
Oh, you email it to him? And
if you share it with them this way,
oh,
you can make them an editor. You can choose it so all they can do is view it.
oh,
So if you've got someone who knows enough about how to open it up to look at it, but you're afraid that they'll make mistakes on it, you can make it so they can view it only. This was a younger client. He was pretty good at it. I went ahead and let him have editing rights.
oh, okay,
It did, however, result in a couple of goofy things like that.
right,
And like I said, once he had figured out how much he owed on the furnace and the windows he didn't tell me about, he could have put those in there on this blue line here,
right, yeah,
and it would have automatically adjusted everything below, would have added everything up.
then you just put it under other encumbrances right there.
This one down, I don't know what he did. Oh yeah, he did.
The same thing.
This was the one that he took. He was looking at, once you paid off the 33,000 he owed, he put it down here under other encumbrances or payoffs.
Oh, yeah, okay,
Okay, so this number originally would have looked different, and there was, I think, a little so again, if they know what they're doing, they can do that. If not, go ahead and share it with them as an editor. You keep a clean copy, and then if they muck something up, you're okay. So you just simply go through and put in the purchase price, the settlement deadline. Everything else stays pretty much the same, and then down here, any closing costs. If they do request something like a home warranty and it's more than $500, you can change that.
Oh, yeah, oh, that's for the warranty too, okay.
Yep.
I see.
Now, this second tab that's on here, offer stats, I added. Let me make sure the template has that. I believe it does. Double check. Now I need to update it. Oh, it shows it as follow-up questions, so I need to update it. The idea behind the offer stats is this is just a real quick and dirty look at the information that may come up. It's good for you to have to know what it is, but typically I'm not going to be sharing these early on because it's things like buyer names. It's a lot easier to be able to defend yourself against somebody saying, well, they didn't pick up because my family had the last name of, fill in the blank on some ethnic minority. When I look and say, all I showed them was the stats. I didn't show them names. Now on this one, I did put the names in there so I could remember who they were.
Right.
And the purchase price, earnest money amount. See, earnest money doesn't show up on the number sheet because it's really not part of the numbers.
Right.
But from a seller's perspective, the more earnest money, the more serious the buyer.
Yeah.
Now that one had a $10,000
Wow.
offer to $10,000 in earnest money.
Is this a recent deal or from like,
This closed in June.
wow, yeah, that many offers. Wow.
Okay. Again, they had deliberately put this at the bottom end of the.
Oh, I see.
We had looked. They were selling between 425 and 460.
An SFR?
They put it at 430.
Single family residence.
Mhm.
Yeah, no wonder why. You have 7 offers.
Okay, and they want to be aggressive.
Yeah.
Concessions, we separate here two different ones. How much they want for closing costs, and then also a separate line for a home warranty and who's going to pay for it. One offered to pay for it, the rest are asking for $600 from the seller to pay for it. Settlement deadline. This one right here was contingent on the sale of an existing home. They had to sell an existing property. They could settle for cash on the purchase 5 days after they sold the existing property.
Mm.
Now, one of the things I shared with them though, as we went through this process with this one, was when this offer came in, there was no, when you make an offer that is contingent on the sale of existing property, you have to disclose that in paragraph 2, and you have to use the contingent upon sale addendum. Their agent didn't do that. He was trying to bypass that and just kept reassuring us that everything was okay. They had an offer and there was no documentation. And so even though it was technically maybe a little bit better offer numbers wise, they didn't feel comfortable because he wasn't following the prescribed path as an agent. That's not going to show up on stats. That's something else that had to be shared with them. Again, they had to mark 1, 2, 3. 3 of them were contingent on the sale of an existing home. 5 of them weren't. So to us, some sellers, that makes a difference. The type of loan. This one could have gone, but again, they were. I also put in there what the response deadline is because we had stated specifically that the sellers in this case were out of country from military assignment. We need at least 48 hours, preferably 72 hours to respond. And are they even, it gave them a sense when they got these as to whether or not they were going to even follow through on that kind of level of instruction. If the buyer's not going to follow through on that, are they going to give us trouble the whole time? And then any additional addenda that were included. This one, disclosure of interest. The agent was related in some way to the buyer. That has to be disclosed up front, so we did. This one was an FHA. If there were repairs, they wanted that were part of the appraisal, they wanted $3,000. The seller to cover the first $3,000 in repairs. This one, contingent is or this one was the one that kept telling us, well, it's cash based, but only if it's and they didn't fill out all the paperwork showing it was contingent. VA offer, I honestly really was kind of hoping we could make that one work, but the contingent sale wasn't even ready to list yet. Wasn't even on the market yet.
Yeah.
Okay. This one wanted $2,000 in FHA repairs. So all of these are put in here. This ESC clause and ESC clause here, that was short for escalation clause. They did receive 2 offers that had escalation clauses that in the event they receive another bona fide offer, you add whatever amount they put in there, like $1,000 more, up to here's the maximum limit. And then I had put in the agent's contact information. And then once we did accept an offer, if their buyer would be interested in being put in a backup position, doing a formal backup. This one you can see, yes, very excited. This was the offer ultimately that they went with. But this gave me an opportunity to keep those organized. Now on this one, that's where that kind of came from, was used to ask those questions. So these are some as the agent, before you present these to your client, you can call if you're not quite sure about something that's going on, you can call. And these are some good follow-up questions to ask the buyer's agent. Verify the contract price, verify concessions. Did you get a pre-approval letter? Is it a pre-approval or pre-qualification? Because they're not the same thing. Check on the status of the subject to sale property. Escalation clause. We actually did receive an offer one time. We had multiple offer situation, 2 escalation clauses. They had not put a maximum value on the escalation clause. Well, technically, we're not going to let it escalate forever. So we needed to know. Appraisal contingency. This is now going another direction. The original appraisal contingency was if it didn't appraise the purchase value, what were you going to do to cover the difference between the two? What we're seeing now is there's potential for, if it's been under contract for a while and the market has softened, what are you going to do if the purchase price is up here and now the appraisal's below, not because you offered overvalue, but because now it's getting undervalued?
Good point.
FHA and VA have built into it protection questions. If you're familiar with those in the FHA VA addendum, there is the mandatory escape clause that's built in. So that's why on the offer stats on this one, where it shows that it's FHA, the VA and FHA, we knew that, and so these three, FHA here, and VA here, all had the state required addendum that says in the event of an appraisal value less than the purchase price, the buyer cannot be required to purchase the home at the contract value. Here are your options. So they needed to know that. This then becomes, these are some good talking points to use when you're presenting the actual numbers themselves. Now, ultimately, who makes the decision on which contract to go with?
Fine.
What do you say when the seller says, well, what do you suggest?
Uh-huh. I haven't had a listing yet, but I would say, well, I'm not the seller, you're the seller. That's what I would guess.
Which one makes the most sense to you
Yeah,
with what I've shared with you?
depends on what your needs are.
And one thing about these, if I've worked with the agent, if I have worked with an agent before, I will tell them, I have worked with this agent before. This is the type of experience I've had with them. I've had interactions with all of these agents now. I've done, over the course of your career, you start seeing some people show up more than once.
What do you think of that guy? Oh, that's, what do you think of that guy? 'Cause I interviewed that guy about 3 weeks ago.
I'll tell you later.
Okay, just tell me that, yeah,
Yeah.
off the camera.
Yeah, but it's a good conversation to have. I've worked with, I can say, I've worked with this person before and it was a very good, positive experience. They were always focused on making sure that, when we need to negotiate things, it wasn't a win-lose situation. It was a let's make this work. Or they've been very creative in helping work through some solutions and working with their buyers. I've had somebody say, well, I've worked with them before. And how was your experience? I've worked with them before.
Yeah,
And because it's a violation of ethics for me to openly
oh, yeah.
to openly bash them, but
Yeah.
they need to know if I've had good experience with an agent, then that can help them understand. Like I said, on this particular case, where we needed to have a specific deadline. If you weren't gonna do that much, are you gonna make it harder for me later on? I worked with an agent who I had to continue to explain to her, the listing agent, actually to him, that the buyer I was working with worked in a secure facility as a government contractor. Once he got to work, his cell phone went in a locker. He went into the secured facility and he was not allowed out until the end of his shift. Well, they sent us an addendum and wanted it signed by 5 o'clock. Sent it to me at noon, wanted it signed by 5. Despite me having told him over and over, I have no way to contact him until at least 5 o'clock. So if you're going to send me this addendum, I can't get it done. Those kind of interactions can, a seller can turn a seller off if that happens over and over from a buyer's perspective. The buyer's agent's doing those kind of things. All right, Mike, what questions? I think we lost Mike. Mindy, what questions have you got?
Sorry, I was trying to find my unmute button. Nothing really. This is all, I don't know, this is probably the third or fourth time I've gone over this specifically, so mostly just trying to ingrain it. But yeah, personally, I don't have any questions.
Okay. The biggest reason behind doing it this way, and I say it over and over and over, is this is a way of helping protect your interest in being able to say, I just presented numbers. We made a decision based on numbers. And then on anything else, any other pertinent information, like who could close fastest, Or are they willing to take one that's contingent? It's just the terms of the offer. That's it.
That's good, so you can keep it all straight. You can look at it in one place.
Keeps it all straight in one place.
Yeah, I like it.
Now, what we are going to do, what our plan is, or for tomorrow, is we're actually going to fill one of these out as if you had received multiple offers. Now, to be honest with you, I'm going to pull, it's actually going to be this particular file because this was the last time I had multiple offers. And it actually wasn't that long ago when you look at what the closing deadline was. This is what can happen with a well-priced property. You can still get multiple offers if your seller is reasonable and thinking ahead in the way that they price it. They knew that 430, where we priced it, was the bottom end of where homes were selling in that area. They were selling between 450 and 460. So they wanted to make sure they would rather have room to go up than be worried about could they go down, have room to go down. And then we can go through on the follow-up questions. Typically what I'll do is I'll just do the same thing. If I'm using these, then I'll just put the offer in there. It's, if with the lenders, it's always a good idea. Did you get a pre-approval letter? Well, if you've got time, call the lender. Look, send them the numbers and say, these are the numbers. Tell me which ones you're most interested in. I'm going to call the lender and find out the latest on how that buyer's set. Most lenders, when you have a pre-approval letter, what you'll typically receive, and this is what the practice I have, is they'll make a custom pre-approval letter for that specific offer. So the borrower could be approved for $480,000. They're making a $450,000 offer. They don't really want the other side to know they've got another $30,000 to work with. But if an escalation clause is on there, are they really approved to go up to what it's escalated to? Or if in a situation like this one, they just said, look, here's the deal. Tell everybody we're doing highest and best. Hit me with your best shot. We're not going to, because the other conversation we have now is if they've got two offers they really, really like, what are their options as a seller? The seller can actually counter more than one offer at a time.
Really? Wow.
The seller can actually counter multiple offers. There is an addendum, and we're going to do a class on the lesser used addendum, the crazy ones, that has to go out that says the seller is responding to multiple offers. Even if your buyer accepts this, understand the seller still has the right to reject. They're waiting to see what kind of responses they get from everybody else before they decide on which one they take. They can choose to reject all of them. They can choose to accept one. If they accept one, they have the right to, you can contact the other agents. And this is why this one showed on offer stats, whether you're interested in the formal backup. Do they want to go ahead and go for a backup offer with the formal backup addendum? Or do you want us to just keep you in the loop? Advantage to your seller with a backup addendum. If buyer one falls out, they know they've already got a deal. Disadvantage is they're locked into that deal and somebody else may come along and say, I like that one, I can offer you more.
Yeah.
About 1 in 4 contracts don't work out from a buyer perspective. In this kind of a market, you notice every one of them was willing to go back up in case something didn't work out. But if you've got this many offers out there, let's set them up the best way they can. And like I said, in this case, because of their situation and the 15-hour time difference in trying to get responses, they just chose to go with highest and best and say, okay, just tell everybody. That's the other conversation to have with the listing is as offers start coming in, you need to find out from your seller if you can, if disclose that you have received multiple offers. You don't have to disclose what the offer terms are unless the seller allows you to. But agents will often ask, have you received any offers? Yes. How many do you have? I'll be honest with you, I have 3 offers right now. Or no, I haven't got any offers. Or I've even been able to say, look, I've got a verbal offer, don't have anything in writing yet. Hit me up. If they receive multiple offers, their choice could be that they already have decided they're going to tell everybody, we want your highest and best by this specific day, we'll decide. Or they could choose to respond. Right now, sellers are just ecstatic to get offers. But well priced, they can still get good offers. One other thing to consider if you're doing a sell buy, where you're representing they're selling so they can move up, is you need to know what the settlement deadline is going to be like, because that's going to play into how you set up the purchase of their next home. Typically in a sell by situation, the settlement deadline for the purchase is tied to the settlement deadline of the sale. It's usually 48 hours later, because you have to have time for that to fund and record and the money to actually be there to use for the down payment of the next purchase. So in those situations, as you're looking at those, and if you need some help with the calendar, come see me, come see Marty, come see Craig. We've done it before. And then in that kind of situation, it's always important to keep conversations with agents on both sides going so they know where you're at if there's any kind of hiccup along the way. My craziest hiccup on that, by the way, was a VA buyer who got shipped to Afghanistan partway through the process. And it was during COVID, so his ship date kept moving. So we had everything planned, what we thought would be the right day to close. And then their actual ship date changed, and only half of the unit could be on the plane at a time. So his executive officer was on a different plane than he was. And the VA required that they have proof that he had arrived safely at his duty station. And so we had to call, and they were buying a house, so that person could buy a house, so that person could, and had to call and get a 48-hour delay in settlement that moved everybody else out 2 days. Had to have all those agents on the phone saying, I'm not making this up. This is a legitimate VA requirement. As soon as his plane hits the ground in Afghanistan, 17.5-hour time difference, he can send us a video showing him, I'm on the ground and alive, but we can't close until we have that. And you're like, wow, yep, that's the craziest.
Does he have to sign a live and well letter? Doesn't his officer have to sign that?
Well, we could do an alive and well letter with his executive officer, but his executive officer was on a flight that was 1 day behind him.
So they allowed the video?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Video worked, but we couldn't do the alive and well letter because the guy that was supposed to sign the alive and well letter was still in the air on a plane behind him.
Wow.
So this gives you a chance to at least put them out there and see what the dates are going to be like and see if they work. Okay. We got 2 minutes, 30 seconds before Zoom kicks us off. Any questions? Hey, Cassandra, thanks for joining us today. I know you're kind of busy.
Thanks for having me. I'm sorry I was late.
All right, it happens. Tomorrow we're gonna at 12:30 we'll go through. We're gonna actually fill one of these out.
Okay.
Okay.
At 12:30.
Yep, 12:30 Monday through Fridays when we do our trainings.
Okay.
Okay, what questions do you guys have that you'd like to go over next week? I am planning on doing a training with Marty on some of the crazy addenda, but it's going to be like, here are the weirdest ones of the 48. But it's going to be real, one of those run through a bunch of them all at once. Would you like to go through some of the contract addenda that you'll see as buyers and sellers? Like, what do you do after the inspection? That kind of stuff.
I think it's a good thing.
Jason's saying yes on that one. Okay.
I wouldn't mind going over that again as well. Yeah.
Okay, all right, so let's take a look at some of the unique addenda the next few days. So that you recognize those and how to use them. The nice thing is that with having Amory as your TC, if you're in a hurry, if you're in a spot where you can't fill it out, she can.
Pretty cool.
But you also need to know what they are because you've got to be able to explain them to your client. This is how we're gonna help protect your interests.
Gotcha.
Okay? All right, guys, I'll put that list together. I'll send that email out tomorrow. And get the Zoom scheduled this time and send that out all at once.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay?
Thanks, Darren.
Thanks, Mindy. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Sorry,